Imagine waking up one morning to find that everything defining your identity, the status, the security, the global brand worth millions, has suddenly vanished. For Harry and Meghan, 2026 has turned that unsettling thought into something far more real. What once sounded like speculation has begun to feel like something far more deliberate, as if a quiet erasure is underway behind palace doors. Reports emerging from within royal circles suggest that William is no longer simply frustrated with his brother. Instead, there are claims he may be ready to take unprecedented action, moves that could effectively remove the Duke and Duchess of Sussex from official royal history. The tone coming from the palace has grown unmistakably firm, signaling that the half-in, half-out royal arrangement is no longer seen as workable. Tensions are no longer confined to whispers or headlines. A serious political storm appears to be building, with discussions moving beyond private conversations into formal spaces like Parliament. What was once debate over tea is evolving into legislative momentum, and the title that Harry has held onto most tightly now seems increasingly vulnerable. But this situation goes far beyond titles alone. It reflects what some are calling a complete institutional reset rather than just another chapter of public drama. In early 2026, the House of Lords formally acknowledged a petition signed by more than 40,000 people calling for the Sussex titles to be revoked. What had once been a wait-and-see approach has shifted, as lawmakers now view the ongoing situation as something much more serious. Senior political figures, including conservative peers and independent members, are no longer limiting themselves to criticism. They are reportedly working toward a structured legal case, accusing Harry of leveraging his royal status for personal, political, and financial benefit abroad. From their perspective, this goes beyond controversy. It challenges the integrity of the institution itself. Insiders claim Harry is deeply angered, seeing these developments as a direct attack from the very establishment he chose to step away from. Meanwhile, in London, the tone is starkly different. The petition is being treated not as fringe dissent, but as a sign of growing institutional fatigue, shifting the debate from whether action should be taken to how quickly it can happen. To understand how serious this threat could become, attention has turned to historical precedent, specifically the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917. Introduced during World War I under George V, this law allowed titles to be stripped from royals whose loyalties were in question. It wasn't symbolic. It completely removed individuals from the peerage. Now, in 2026, that same legal framework is being revisited. While no one suggests that Harry has committed wartime betrayal, critics argue that his public criticisms of the monarchy, through media projects and his memoir, represent a different kind of disloyalty. For some lawmakers, this raises a difficult question about whether a title retains meaning if it is used in ways that undermine the institution it represents. At the same time, another major factor is intensifying the situation, the ongoing security dispute. Harry has been engaged in a legal battle over his right to taxpayer-funded protection while in the UK. As new risk assessments emerge, divisions have grown between those who see a genuine threat and those concerned about public backlash over the cost. Public frustration has added fuel to the debate. Many are questioning why significant resources should be allocated to someone who no longer performs royal duties or resides in the country. For critics, this argument has become central. Without a royal title, there would be no justification for such protection. Ironically, the fight for security may be accelerating the very outcome Harry hopes to avoid. While pressures mount in the UK, challenges are also emerging in the United States. In March 2026, a major shift occurred when Netflix reportedly stepped back from Meghan's lifestyle venture, now known as Ever. Originally launched under a different name, the brand had been positioned as a major business pivot into luxury goods, but setbacks and complications appear to have weakened its momentum. This development represents a significant blow to their commercial ambitions. What was once seen as a promising expansion into lifestyle branding now faces uncertainty, adding another layer of pressure during an already turbulent period. Without the support of a major studio, Meghan is now pushing ahead on her own, though industry insiders remain doubtful about the outcome. Her Duchess title has always been central to the brand's appeal, acting as the royal aura that justified premium pricing. Now that Netflix has stepped back, that title has become her strongest remaining asset. If Parliament were to remove it, the brand as Ever could quickly lose relevance altogether, turning what once seemed promising into something that never fully materialized. There's a growing sense that the Sussex brand may be entering a downward spiral. For the first time, Harry and Meghan are facing the possibility of how things look when Hollywood begins to distance itself, especially if the royal connection that once set them apart starts to fade. What they've often portrayed as a unique struggle may actually be part of a broader pattern already seen across Europe. In recent years, monarchies in countries like Denmark and Sweden have taken similar steps. Margrethe II made headlines when she removed princely titles from several of her grandchildren, explaining it as a way to give them more independence. Likewise, Karl XVI Gustav implemented comparable changes. These decisions were framed not as punishment, but as modernization, reshaping royal families for a new era. These precedents offer Charles a strong justification. By pointing to similar actions taken by other European royals, he can present the situation not as a personal conflict, but as part of a broader institutional evolution. For Harry, this shift is particularly significant. It reframes the issue from a family disagreement into a structural reform, which is far more difficult to challenge. The debate in Westminster has also taken on a more serious tone, focusing on what some officials describe as title laundering. In the UK, the monarchy is expected to remain politically neutral, yet critics argue that the Sussexes have used their titles in ways that intersect with American political discourse. When Harry publicly criticized aspects of the US Constitution, it raised concerns about the appropriateness of a British royal engaging in such commentary while still holding a royal title. Lawmakers are now discussing potential measures, such as proposals linked to something being called the Dignity of the Crown Act, to prevent royal titles from being used in politically sensitive contexts abroad. The argument from some quarters is that the title has been used in ways that conflict with the institution's neutrality, prompting discussions about whether it should be withdrawn altogether. Public opinion is playing a major role in shaping this situation. Recent polling data has shown William and Catherine enjoying very high approval ratings, reinforcing their image as stable and dependable figures within the monarchy. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan have seen a significant decline in public support, with unfavorable views rising sharply. These numbers are more than just statistics, they influence decision-making at the highest levels. While Charles may still view the situation through a personal lens as a father, William is believed to be approaching it more pragmatically, focusing on preserving the monarchy's long-term reputation. For him, public trust is essential, and any action taken would likely reflect that priority. Amid all this, one of the most sensitive aspects is the future of the next generation. Archie and Lilibet remain largely removed from the conflict, yet their titles could become part of the broader debate. If Harry were to lose his own title, questions would arise about whether his children could continue using theirs, as royal titles are often seen as deriving from parental status. For Meghan, these titles carry significance beyond tradition. They are closely tied to the public image and narrative surrounding their family. Removing them would represent a complete break from the royal identity that has shaped their global recognition. However, some policymakers argue that such a step might be necessary to prevent the emergence of a detached, overseas branch of royalty. Ultimately, the question becomes one of value. What remains of the Sussex brand without its royal foundation? With Netflix stepping away, business challenges mounting, and political scrutiny increasing, the potential loss of titles could have a dramatic impact. In an industry like Hollywood, where perception drives opportunity, the difference between being a titled royal and a former one can be enormous. Signs of fatigue are already beginning to show. Projects are facing greater criticism, and reports suggest that their once strong network of high-profile connections may be shrinking. As the situation continues to unfold, the future of Brand Sussex appears more uncertain than ever. The atmosphere around Montecito feels increasingly unstable, largely because the royal connection was the defining factor that once set Harry and Meghan apart. Without that distinction, they risk blending into a community already filled with wealthy and influential figures. What was once seen as a symbol of a modern, global monarchy is now being reframed by critics as a cautionary example in royal history. While public attention remains fixed on the visible tension between the brothers, a quieter and far more calculated process is unfolding behind palace walls. Inside Buckingham Palace, senior aides, private secretaries, and constitutional experts are reportedly working on contingency plans. These preparations are not driven by emotion, but by a focus on preserving the institution. In this context, Harry is being viewed less as family and more as a reputational liability that must be managed carefully. The approach being discussed is notably understated. Rather than dramatic announcements, the strategy centers on administrative precision, updates to official records, formal notices, and minimal public spectacle. It reflects a deliberate effort to handle the matter quietly, relying on procedure rather than confrontation. At the core of this situation lies a critical decision about which legal route might be taken. One option involves the use of letters patent, a direct order issued by Charles. This method would allow swift action without requiring parliamentary approval and has precedent in past royal decisions. However, such a move could easily be interpreted as a personal action by a father against a son, potentially reinforcing existing narratives. The alternative is a parliamentary process involving both the House of Lords and the House of Commons. While slower, this route would frame the outcome as a decision made by the state rather than the royal family alone. It would also carry far greater permanence, making any reversal extremely difficult, even for future monarchs like William. In this scenario, the issue shifts from a private dispute to a matter of national governance. For some time, Harry and Meghan appeared to rely on international support, particularly within Commonwealth nations, as a form of stability. However, by 2026, that assumption has begun to weaken. In countries such as Australia and Canada, public opinion has shifted and government decisions, especially regarding security funding, have signaled a distancing from their situation. If this trend continues, it could significantly reduce Harry's global influence. Losing recognition or support beyond the UK would mean more than just a symbolic setback. It would reshape his position on the international stage, limiting any remaining diplomatic relevance. Another sensitive area affected by these developments is the future of the Invictus Games. This initiative has long been closely associated with Harry, representing a meaningful intersection of his military background and public role. However, as discussions around his titles intensify, concerns are emerging among sponsors and partners about the event's long-term positioning. Much of the appeal of the Games has historically been tied to its royal association. Without that connection, there are questions about whether it can maintain the same level of prestige, funding, and global attention. This raises a broader issue about how much of Harry's public legacy is independent and how much has been linked to the institution he stepped away from. At the same time, the debate is no longer confined to official institutions. Online platforms have become a powerful arena where public opinion is actively shaping the conversation. A growing network of digital commentators and social media voices has amplified scrutiny, turning online sentiment into something lawmakers are increasingly acknowledging in formal discussions. What was once background noise has evolved into a visible and influential force. In 2026, the scale and intensity of public discourse online have made it impossible for decision-makers to ignore, further complicating an already complex and highly sensitive situation. The Sussexes, who once aimed to shape their own narrative through major platforms like Netflix and Spotify, are now facing a very different reality. For every carefully crafted public statement, there seems to be an overwhelming wave of online analysis dissecting their claims and highlighting inconsistencies. Harry and Meghan are no longer dealing only with traditional media scrutiny. They are up against a vast, decentralized digital audience that is increasingly vocal and demanding accountability. This growing online pressure has played a significant role in shifting the tone of the broader conversation. What was once passive observation has evolved into active influence, with public sentiment becoming harder for institutions to ignore. In many ways, the internet hasn't just documented their challenges, it has amplified them, shaping the environment in which decisions are now being made. As discussions intensify around the possibility of Harry becoming Mr. Harry Windsor, attention naturally turns to the cost of the independence they once pursued. The move away from royal life was framed as a step toward privacy, yet the years that followed have been among the most publicly scrutinized periods in modern royal history. Their pursuit of financial independence has also drawn criticism, particularly as much of their work has remained closely tied to their royal past. Now, the consequences of those choices appear to be catching up. For Harry, the potential loss goes beyond titles. It touches on identity itself. What once symbolized freedom may increasingly feel restrictive as they navigate mounting pressures, shifting public perception, and a family that seems to have continued forward without them. Within their private world, the contrast is striking. Surrounded by high security, managing ventures that face uncertain futures, and distanced from their former roles, the independence they sought may feel more complicated than anticipated. The broader issue is no longer just about status. It reflects the reality that once separation from the institution is complete, returning to it may not be possible. At the same time, developments behind the scenes continue to move forward with quiet precision. Legal discussions, institutional planning, and strategic decisions are converging into what some view as an inevitable outcome. If these processes reach their conclusion, Harry could face a profound transformation from a central royal figure to someone whose connection to that world exists only in memory. Such a shift would not necessarily be driven by personal conflict alone, but by a perceived need to protect the long-term stability and image of the monarchy. For an institution that has endured for centuries, maintaining public trust remains essential, even when it requires difficult decisions. The broader message emerging from this situation is clear. Stepping away from royal duties while continuing to benefit from royal identity creates a tension that is difficult to sustain. Attempting to balance both worlds, tradition and independence, has proven far more complex than anticipated. Now, global attention remains fixed on what comes next. It is not only a question of titles or status, but of how Harry and Meghan will redefine themselves moving forward. As the royal connection continues to fade, the focus shifts to whether a new identity can take its place, or whether the legacy they leave behind will be shaped more by what was lost than by what was built.